Hi, on the Woodpecker today, by popular demand, I'm going to talk more about my dust filter controller. I bet you remember that I've built 2 dust filters in my shop, and that I've made my own controller. A lot of you asked for a more in-depth episode on the controller, so let's go. I designed my own PCBs, and I had a lot of comments about why I didn't use an Arduino. Well, an Arduino by itself does nothing, so I would have had to make a custom PCB anyway. So why bother? I often compared an Arduino to the old electronic suitcase my parents gave me when I was a teenager. It's great for playing with electronics, but not for a final project. I always do a prototype by using a perforated PCB and wires. Enough of that, let's begin. Those are all the parts needed to complete one unit. Looking at them more closely, you can see it's not that much. Soldering is so easy that all my circuits will be assembled by René. Okay, I know, some people think I married Wonder Woman. Maybe they're not that far from the truth, but it's still not that complicated. First thing René has to solder is the microcontroller's socket. I make her solder all the parts according to their complexity and height. So after the socket, she solders all the resistors. She passes the wire through the hole, solder them, and cut the wire's excess. Then she has to be careful with the next parts, the regulators and the transistors. The shape on the PCBs are not the orientation they have to be soldered, so she has to place them differently than what's on the drawing. But after that, she can solder them in place. Next comes the diode. She's careful to orient it the same way as shown. While she's at it, she solders the small capacitors, then the LEDs. After that, she cuts some connectors and solders them in place, and all the modules connectors. Next, all the electrolytic capacitors, but she's careful about their polarity. And finally, the relay. This will be my own test board, because on my other boards, the relay will be bigger. I was reminded that a resistive load is not the same as an inductive load, so I'll be using bigger relays from now on. And here it is, a fully assembled unit. It's now time to put it to the test. The first thing I do is apply the power. And it's a good start. The power LED is bright and shiny. So I can insert the microcontroller in its socket. But that's not enough. I need to program it. So I hook up my programmer and program it. After several seconds and a lot of blinking, it's completely programmed. Now I can see that the right LED is blinking. This is the first thing the circuit does when it's powered up. But this won't be my one and only test. I begin by checking the RF remote. First things first, I have to put a jumper here so the microcontroller knows I have an RF receiver on board. Then I can plug the receiver, power the unit, and try this. And as I predicted, this worked just fine. Next, I'm going to check the Bluetooth receiver. And with the receiver in place, I can check the pot position. And yes, no surprise here, it's working. I also check if I can start and stop the filtration. Another success story. Now I can try the clock module. First, I need to put another jumper in place. This means that this circuit has a clock module. I plug it in place and try it. The first thing I'm going to do is ask for the time. It's not the right time. I set the clock and ask the time again. Another success. Next thing to do is check the dust sensor. But first, I'll make a red mark where the red wire of the dust sensor should be and plug the sensor. The dust sensor's wire is plugged into another wire, and it's this one that I plug into the controller. Now I send a command that returns a non-stop readout of the dust level. This works great. but I still jam a pencil inside the sensor just to check if the readout changes. And it's confirmed, the dust sensor works like a charm. I can now check the small dust fan. After plugging it in place, I can control its speed, but showing a fan speed on camera is quite difficult. So I'll demonstrate the speed with my mini oscilloscope. You can clearly see that when I send the command, the duty cycle changes, and believe me, the fan speed also. But if I want to change the speed without the Bluetooth receiver, I need to put the last jumper in place, and now when I move the pot, the speed changes. Maybe it's easier to see on the scope. But when the setting is done, I absolutely have to remove the jumper. There's one small feature I have to explain. If the filtration is started with the iRef remote, the filtration can be turned off with the remote until this LED stops blinking. In fact, it's 10 seconds. I had to add this feature after the guy who cleans my driveway came and my filtration system went crazy. The last thing to do is to take care of the second controller, but only if a second controller is in place. But this is not as simple as plug and play, because by default, both modules will connect to each other automatically, and this is not what we want. So now I'm going to show you how to sync this master to this slave. And this is not an easy task. First, I need a USB to serial interface, like this one. Then I plug my master Bluetooth module in it. To power the slave, I'll switch it with my own module. Then I plug the USB into the computer. To access the setup mode, I need to keep my finger on this tiny switch on the master module, and the rest is done with the terminal program. In the top left corner, I kept a notepad with all the commands I'll have to use to manage this. At this point, the master is plugged into the USB serial device, and I have my finger on the button. Now, I just copy-paste the command from the notepad. First of all, I check that everything is working by sending the AT command. Next, I check if the baud rate is actually at 9600 bauds. If not, I use the next command line and recheck it. Then I clear all the paired device. Set it to be in master mode. Then I bind the master to a dummy address and force it to always connect to this address. Then I can power on the slave module and search for all the Bluetooth devices. At this point, I receive the address of the module I want to pair it with, and the only thing I need to do is to change the columns to commas and send back the new bind command with this address. And now it's done. Both modules are paired together. So if I ask the controller's version, I have my answer. And now this master can only be paired with this slave. From the start, I've been using alligator clips to power my controller. I think it's time to make a better connector. To avoid having troubles later on, I also identified the positive with a bit of red paint. Plugging this the wrong way can ruin a good day. But I'm not too worried. I planned this by adding a diode to my design, so plugging this the wrong way would mean it just would not work. Now I can put this inside its box and use this connector as my filter on-off switch. Speaking of powering my filters, I'm going to show you how I wired mine. First of all, every filter is plugged into a wall outlet, which is controlled by a wall switch. So this way, I can turn my filtration off whenever I want. Then, inside each filter, I have an electrical box. And here's how I hook up my boxes. On my elaborate drawing, you can see I have one plug, a wall plug, a switch, and the controller's connector. First of all, the wall plug and the switch are inside the metal electrical box. I wire the green wire to the box and the plug. Next, I wire the white wire to one side of the plug. Then I break the jumper that connects the top plug to the bottom plug and plug the black wire to one plug. Then, to power the other plug, I bring the black wire to the switch, and the other side of the switch is wired to the other plug. So with this, I have one plug which is always powered, and the other one which is controlled by this switch. Now I just need to use another wire and hook up the controller's connector to the switch, just like that. And this is how both filters are hooked up. But a Bluetooth module doesn't automatically connect to a computer. As you can see, I have no port assigned to my new module. To add a port, I need to find all the Bluetooth peripherals. Eventually, the computer will find a HC06 Bluetooth module, and when it will be ready to be paired, you can pair it. Then, I just need to enter the secret code, which is actually 1234. And the Bluetooth module is paired with my computer. I can go back to my terminal program and connect my new module to my controller. But this is not very intuitive, so I made a Windows program to control all of this. On my website, I have written instructions, but there's no harm in showing it. The first thing to do is to download the program from my website. Then you can execute the setup program. I don't know why, but Windows warns this might be a potential risk to my computer. But since I programmed every line of this, I know there's no risk at all, and I install the program. Then I have the same warning before starting it. I ignore it, and here it is, my controller program. As you can see, it's not connected to a device. So I go to the drop-down menu and select the new port I've just added. And after pressing connect, I'm connected to the controller. The main window is minimalist, but the start-stop button is there. Also, if I hover on top of the air quality, I have the dust sensor reading. And if I click on it, I get a continuous average reading of the dust level. But I don't like having too much data exchanges all the time, so I stop the continuous reading. Then I have some menus, like the setting menu. First option is the time. You can ask for the controller's time, but you can see it's not the right time. So let's sync it to my computer. To do so, I just have to select Set Time, and now the controller's time is synced with my computer. The same option is available for the date. Then there's the build version. This sends back the same information as if I had sent the command B. RTC just informs you if the controller has a clock or not. The air quality slider works with the actual air quality. The default threshold is 0.1 microgram by cubic meter. If I want to change that setting, I just move the slider around. Then the fan speed. The speed can be changed with this slider. But if I go too low, the fan will just stop turning. Then filter time. I'll come back to this setting later on. I also have the automatic filtering time, which is the amount of time the filter will work by itself, and with the time of automatic filtering, I can start the filtration at the same time each day. So in this example, the filtration will start at 2 in the afternoon for a period of 65 minutes. Then I have the debug menu. First item on the list, test mode. If this checkbox is selected, more information will be shown in the main text box window. But this mode will disturb the proper functioning of the second filter, so I only use it when it's needed. Next, I have the funny option of seconds in a minute. Okay, this is not really useful. This is left over from when I was programming this, and I didn't want to wait for many minutes for an action to take place. So a minute became only 1 second. I can also reset the unit. Then there's the pot position. If I move the pot, I can see the new position. I also have the option to use the pot or not. If I check this box, instead of using the pot position when starting the filtration with the iRef remote, the unit will use the filtering time of the first menu. I also have the dust sensor calibration. By default, its calibration is set to 94, so if the dust readings seems odd, I can recalibrate the sensor. And now the dust calibration is set to 87. This will change the dust reading just a bit. And finally, the check for iRef remote checkbox. If it's unchecked, the remote is useless. All its commands will be discarded. I also have the About menu. There you can find the version of this program, and you can also change the language from English to French. When the program is started, it automatically checks to see if I have a newer version on my website than the one inside the controller. If so, it will ask if you wish to upgrade the firmware. You can disable this by checking the "Don't bother me with automatic firmware updates." But there are other ways to upgrade the firmware. You can choose a file which is on your computer. On my website, I have some download links to the latest firmware. Or you can simply use the file directly from the menu, which downloads the latest version anyway. Then the controller gets into programming mode and programs the chip. This is not very fast, but still, it's faster than having to get the device out of the filter and using a fast programmer. But when it's done, the version is updated and you can see the new build version down there. You can also reprogram the EEPROM to the default settings. And with this, you know everything about the Windows program. But I also have an Android app. Just like for the Windows program, I have some information about it on my website. But here it is anyway. First, I need to install the app on my phone. To find the link, I use a QR code from my website. Then, just like last time, I get a warning about my own program. So after ignoring all that, I can install and start the app. And here it is. But I'm not connected to any Bluetooth device. I fixed that right away. First, I need to go to the Bluetooth settings and find the list of the paired Bluetooth devices that can be paired to my phone. Then I just pair my new module to my phone, and just like last time, I have to enter the secret code, 1234. Now my phone can recognize this particular module. So inside my app, I can click on Connect and choose the actual module address. And now my app is connected to my controller. The main window is not very busy. There's the on-off button and the filtration period. I also have a button which displays the air quality. The last button is to open the rest of the options. All this is pretty similar to my Windows program, but I'll just point out the small differences that you will find here and there. First, to send a command, you have to use this text box. The answer will be inside the big text box. I will skip the rest of the controls because they work the same as in my last program. They just look a little bit different. But I will stop at Show All Transmissions. When this box is checked, all the commands are shown, like the code to inform the program that the filtration is on or off. And if combined with the test mode, then you will receive a lot of information. But it's only useful for debugging. The Sync with Filter button is only there for older phone models. This is useless for newer phones. Speaking of old phones, I also added a stop button at the bottom because my old phone gave me some troubles. Then I added the option of being able to add an off button at all time. The phone I use in the shop is not powerful enough to process the received information in time. And this is the look of the display with an off button. But to manage to do all this, I had to use a lot of tools, if you can call them tools. First of all, the electronics design was done with the site EasyEDA. On the same site, I also designed the actual PCBs. And it's here that I made my mistake about the badly oriented regulators and transistors. Then all the microcontrollers programming was done with CodeVision. The code takes a good size of the chip, but I still have some space left to make minor changes. Then the Windows program was programmed in C# using Visual Studio. I did my best. I'm not the one who makes a living programming video games. It's my son. And finally, the Android app was done with the site MIT App Inventor. On this site, you make a visual design of how you want your app. Then, on the blocks section, you program the app using interlocking blocks. This was my first time I did something like that. One thing I can say is that it's very different from what I'm used to. So, this was my too long version of my dust filter controller. Now you'll forgive me, I have lots of boards to check. If you want more information, you can go to my website. And we will see each other soon on the Woodpecker.